Hello, welcome back. Episode 2 of our brand new podcast. Remember, it's not just going to be me, Hugh, Woozencroft, Jordan Jarrett Bryan, Darren Lewis with you for every episode, but it is us once again, and the podcast has a working title. Mm-hmm. Go on, you suggested it, so.
Well, I'm not really good at names of pods and shows, but I just threw out there, Whisper It Loudly was a good name to have because I think it, whilst doesn't give the obvious idea of what we're talking about, which is sports, politics, culture, and more. It's us saying things that we say in our group that are quite forthright and opinionated, but we're not shouting it. We're doing it in a way that we think is intellectual, articulate, in a way that hopefully cuts through.
We are going to shout from time to time.
Probably, yeah.
It's
Can we
talk
talk about the ones that didn't make it?
No, because they might make it. So you guys can tell us if it's a terrible name, because this is, as I say, still a working title. But I like it. Whisper It Loudly, a sport and society podcast. So you get the idea. Little comment on football and sport generally. Little comment on life as well. No frills, just us, some insight, criticism, bit of fun as well. Hopefully you enjoy the first episode, so you've stayed with us. If you haven't listened to it, go back and check it out. And you can now find us on your favourite social media app. If they're either Twitter/X or Instagram, just search for Whisper It Loudly podcast, and you'll see some clips of the latest shows as well. And don't forget, I'll say it now, I'll say it at the end of the podcast. If you enjoy it, like it, subscribe, make sure you come back, check us out.
Share the thing.
Once again, share it, tell your friends. Yes, exactly, it's a family affair. Right, let's get into it.
Before we get into our first topic, super briefly, because you mentioned that we will be touching on sports, because we're not just football heads here. Super briefly, it feels timely, AJ's fight against Ngannou. If AJ loses, is he done? And secondly, if he wins, does it matter how he wins?
How do you define done?
A chance at being viewed seriously as a 3-time world champion. Has that opportunity then gone if he loses?
Well, by virtue of the fact that you asked the question, you must think so.
I think no, just because there's not a lot of options out there.
Yeah, I
think reputationally, I think he might be done, but I don't think in terms of another shot at the belt.
I don't think he will ever be done in the context of the way that he's viewed by us, by people, by society, by people, by his fans. He's a very likable, very affable, charismatic guy whose appeal transcends boxing. In the context of boxing, people still see other fighters as being superior to him. And I think he needs a run of victories, convincing victories to change that.
I hope he wins, by the way. I'm a big fan of it, so I hope he wins.
He will win. I don't believe that these Ngannou, I just think they're exhibitions, to be perfectly honest. I think Ngannou's got an opportunity, he brings a certain audience into boxing at a time where people couldn't make fights. He stepped into the void, people were failing tests or getting injured, and I just think he's there, a serious name. But I listen, it's all speculation, but I just don't see he has genuinely got a chance of winning these fights. Take from that what you will. Yeah. You ask a big question and then go quickly.
Sorry, I just thought, because I know we got to get...
But anyway, I didn't even answer the question.
Sorry.
I agree with you. Joshua's not done because I immediately think, would there be interest if he fought Tyson Fury? Even if he lost. And I think there would. And that would be a big fight. So still something out there for him. So yeah, I hope he wins as well. But do you know what? I have to say, we're all friends with Adi Oladipo of DAZN, who's out there in Riyadh at the moment. I had to message him. I said, this is a big fight for Africa. And no one's really mentioned that. Anthony Joshua's heritage, obviously Francis Ngannou. Like, I looked at this and I was like, oh my God, we got a heavyweight fight with two men of African heritage here. This is, and it hasn't really been sold as that.
Why do you think that is?
I don't know. Well, Ngannou came in with his dress and I suddenly went, oh yeah, like it was visual to me. And AJ was standing there, and I don't know who sponsors him now, but looking like he's wearing just a tracksuit. And I thought, I messaged Ade and said, and he needs to put on like some Nigerian dress here. I want to see his African culture as well. We got Francis. This outwardly to the world, we should be saying Africa's standing on top of the world of boxing this weekend.
Do you think the fight is viewed and has wider appeal for people in Western Europe if it's framed the way it is rather than the way you suggest?
I don't know. I don't think people would run away from this fight if they were like, it's two African fighters or two people of African heritage, and it's not for me. I don't think people.
I don't
would
think
see.
so either. I think maybe contractually he wasn't allowed to not wear armor. What are they called? Armor.
Well, let's not name the
sorry,
brand,
yeah.
but
the brand that sponsor him.
yeah, because I don't actually know if it's still them. So I don't know.
Whoever it is, I'd imagine on those sorts of
Other
things.
sponsors are
They're
available.
available, of course.
Always trying to bait people.
Sorry. Sponsor us though. You know what I mean? We'll take your money. You know what I mean?
AJ Boxing, we're there.
Yeah.
I don't think it would have mattered in terms of selling the fight.
Maybe not.
I don't think so. But it's an opportunity missed.
I think so. Although we don't know how the ring walk's going to be, etc., etc. So
Just give us a good tune. Just give us a good
One
tune.
good tune.
Yeah, come on, man. Just come in with a really good tune. None of this nonsense. Just give us someone okay, he's on smoke. He's coming in with a tune. Let's do it.
what I hate is when they perform it live.
Yeah.
Because just always.
Yeah, allow it.
Yeah,
It's not a
yeah.
concert, mate.
The ring walks aren't as good as they used to be.
They're not.
They're not. Big Chris on the Harley. Come on. Back in the day.
That would have been one
Prince
of the very
Nazim.
best.
Nazim, yeah. Didn't he come in a couple times hard?
Simply the best.
Yeah.
Chris Eubank with the
They're proper.
Is there charisma in boxing on that scale anymore?
No, that's the reason.
No.
Everyone's trying too hard.
The Tyson Fury one, the Anthony Joshua fight, was it with the I don't know if it was those two at Wembley with the Big Ben, with the double decker bus, not the Big Ben, double decker bus. Who was that? Whose fight was that?
Ooh.
And I thought it could have been something more. I think it was a Fury fight at Wembley Stadium. Someone will correct us
I
now.
just think the charisma's
And
gone
there
out
was
of
a-
boxing. I think the charisma's gone, the thought, the originality, it's gone out of boxing. So much of the trash talk used to actually be quite entertaining and lively, and so much of it now descends into anarchy, fighting. It shouldn't. If it goes that way, then it's a failure of the management of the theatrics around the fight, because it should be enough to draw you in, not to disgust you and to repel you. And some of the boxers, some quite well-known boxers, their discourse ahead of fights for me is just appalling.
But I
and it
don't
turns me off
think-
rather than turns me on.
Yeah, I know Eddie Hearn's got a lot of criticism. I heard people saying like, you know, just in terms of the contracts in America and stuff, and people, and even here in the UK, you know, people wanting money back because maybe promoters haven't delivered the product that the broadcasters wanted them to and stuff like that. But I think back to when we were younger, and the promoters were almost better than the fighters at selling a fight for you. The promoter was a genuine promoter.
Yeah.
And we don't see that Don King level of charisma from the promoters either. It's all tittle-tattle, back and forth arguments about who didn't sign the contract. No one cares about that.
Yeah.
Tell us why we should pay the money to watch these two go toe-to-toe. No one cares about your little quabbles behind the scenes.
But also, is that not linked to the fact that what Darren's saying there, that we had better promoters then, but that was because we had better fighters then. So it's easier to be a better promoter if you've got a genuine, charismatic, world-class fighter.
I don't know if we necessarily had better fighters. All right, okay, there were premium products, but you can take that from every generation of boxer and say, and I get it now, there are very few weight classes, although heavyweight division supposedly was one of them, where you had even half a dozen where you could say these are world-level boxers. And yet they either haven't made the fights, or when they have made the fights, we've all watched them, but that buzz hasn't been there. Maybe it's around the charisma and quality of the boxers, but for me, even back in the day, sometimes a big fight was fighting a no mark. You'd be excited for it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah,
like, because they could get you interested in a Lennox Lewis versus Hassan Rahman.
Yeah.
Even though you were thinking that Rahman's getting knocked out, you know, I know he won, but
You still want to watch that.
you still want to watch it.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And now I don't see that. If Anthony Joshua was going to fight someone who was down the pecking order,
You have to
But I
force
think
yourself to
you'd have
I
to-
think it's a combination of the two. I always gauge big fights by the appeal they have to the people with only a passing interest in the sport. A lot of the big fights are niche fights, and if you love boxing, you will watch it regardless of who they're fighting. But if the man in the street who doesn't normally watch boxing is sucked in, drawn in to watch a fight, the kind of fighters I used to see them being drawn in and sucked in to watch, Eubank, Tyson. Everyone remembers that fight against Buster Douglas and all the controversy around that fight, but also they watched it partly because Tyson was a phenomenon and partly because lots of people wanted to see Eubank put on his backside because he had that arrogance, that wonderful charisma that challenged people to say, hit me on the chin, and they couldn't. I remember Nassim Hamed in his prime, again, he had that charisma about him. And I think it's a combination of the two. Some of those fighters had that charisma. Some of them had charismatic promoters who were able to make what looked on paper to be an average fight have more interest. A lot of the stuff I see so far is so anticlimactic. Boxers talking a good game, getting in the ring, failing to deliver, either being beaten by or scraping past average fighters. And eventually, like I said, there will be boxing aficionados who watch it and say, well, we love it regardless. But there'll be people, men in the street, who look at that, women in the street, who look at that and say, not for me.
But that's also to do with the fact that it's not free anymore.
Again, it's a combination. So there isn't one singular thing.
If the public can just watch it on ITV.
Yeah, but if you know you're paying for it, and in the recent past there have been lots of fights I've paid for and thought, what did I pay for this for? Why did I do this? Why did I go at my mate's house at midnight on Saturday night to sit waiting for the ring walk and my eyes are half closed and whatnot, and this is garbage.
That's what I'm saying. I think whilst the fighters and the promoters are making more money now, they've lost more viewers. It was easier for a promoter to get the average Joe on the street who's not a massic boxing fan to watch the fight on the weekend because it's on ITV.
It was on ITV.
It's easy. Whereas now, to make me, or when I'm a sports reporter, so I watch all these fights, but to get someone that's not a massive boxing fan to subscribe to Sky or subscribe to DAZN for a fight that was two fighters who you may have heard of, you might not have. I don't care how charismatic you are. Are you going to pay for that?
I would if it was built up enough and the fighter was consistent enough.
Guy.
No,
the average John's
the average
for the fight.
No, I don't know. I disagree with you. I think that because if you are a good fighter or the fight's been packed enough or there is enough interest generated around it, the interest in that fight makes it from the sports pages to the news pages, and that's when you get people with a passing interest watching.
No, but a lot of people in this country don't even like boxing. Boxing is a very divisive sport in of itself. So if you're already trying to sell a sport that large parts of the country don't actually think is a good sport or something you should be watching, plus then you've got two kind of known fighters, plus you're then asking them to pay £20 to pay for it, I'll pass. You're not asking them to pay for a tennis match or a football match that's not divisive.
I think if they genuinely capture, they don't necessarily have to transcend, they just capture the headlines that week or the narrative that week. It's not that everyone's going to run out and buy it individually, but people are just going to say, you watching the fight this weekend? Yeah, come round, I'll pay for it, or we'll split it, or whatever. Like, we'll have a few drinks, or even if it's at 3 a.m, like, we'll go out, we'll come back, we'll watch the fight, like, stay at mine. Like, they need to get to that level of interest. It doesn't have to be that everyone just runs out to get their specific pay-per-view, but you just get eyes on it, not necessarily the sales, but man, we'd have 20, 30 people watching those fights round our house when we were younger, man. Everyone would come round. And it was huge, man.
Yeah, it was.
And people, I remember when Lewis fought Tyson, and it was just like immediately, it was incredible. It was like, look at his eyes. Tyson's going to lose. We were like, look at him, he's not the same. That level of buzz, boxing's not generating at the moment. And it still has good fights. There's part of it where I think the bodies that run the sport need to seriously take a look at how they're making people make fights. Because I think it's actually now in the hands of the fighters. It's way too much.
Hugh, do you think because boxing now has its own dedicated channels, it doesn't, and obviously, even if it's not a good fight, it will still generate interest within the boxing fraternity, that it doesn't feel it needs to make its way to the mainstream as much as it used to?
All I would say is, often I look at people at the top of boxing and think, these people don't care about the sport. These people aren't here doing the best for boxing. What you get in a lot of sports is people making a decision that's good for the sport. Like athletes doing things that aren't necessarily all in their interest, but are good for the sport. Some obviously we know live golf and whatnot. There's athletes that are making decisions that are just purely for them and not for the good of the sport. But I think for a lot of athletes, particularly ones that aren't earning hundreds of millions, decisions are made that are for the best of the sport. They could make more money, they could play more games, they could go and have a 39th game in this country or that country, and they would make much more money. But is it the good of the sport? Is it for the good of the athletes generally? and I think they come to a decision. You look at some of the unions in sport, you think about tennis and stuff like that, you know, trying their best, some of the biggest athletes in the sport, to do what's right for the ones at the lower end, which I think is a great thing. But when I look at boxing, what I see a lot is, well, we're the big dogs, we're going to eat. That's it. That's all that matters to us.
So my question would be, is that understandable when you think of the type of thing that they're doing? So unlike golf, football, tennis, I'm getting my head punched in for a living. So I kind of have to think about me.
No, but listen,
I've got to maximise my purse in this window.
No. But here's the thing. The decisions in boxing that they're not making would make them more money. So they could do both, and they choose not to.
Okay.
I don't want to make the fight because this guy's getting 5% more than me. But you're going to be making more money in this fight than any other fight that you can make. But it's about what, pride, ego. I don't know what it's about, but what you've done is, for all of us that got excited 5 or 6 years ago about the greatest generation in heavyweight boxing, possibly, or at least the greatest heavyweight period for a long, long time. Bro, we haven't even seen the fights. These guys haven't even made the fights. And all they're doing is arguing with each other. And we're meant to follow boxing as if it's a soap opera. We want to see the fights. We don't care who's... Well, we put the contract in front of you. Your man didn't say this. No one cares.
And I think that's...
And boxing...
That's such a good point.
...has dropped down the pecking order in terms of interest when it should be at the top.
And then when you factor in the YouTubers that are coming in now, and heavyweight fights are, as we kind of come full circle, with an MMA fighter versus AJ, that makes people think, oh, this is
I think you're right. The essence of sport is competition, high level competition. You're going next weekend to the Liverpool against Manchester City fight. Two top teams.
Not a fight.
I mean, some would say
it might be.
In football terms, that's a fight. Two heavyweights. That's two heavyweights. Yeah.
When there's a fight on the pitch,
When it uses Darren on that.
That'll be a good story.
The people that think it's scripted are going to be like, see, Darren Lewis knew. Darren Lewis knew there was going to be a fight. Just a game.
Just a game. But you're going, and the interest in that is off the scale. Why? Because it's two top teams who are putting their unbeaten records on the line. If you look at horse racing, Cheltenham Festival next weekend, there's an outstanding horse called Constitution Hill. Wins without even breaking a sweat. But it won't race against any of the other top horses of its generation. A lot of punters are angry. And now it's obviously being pulled out of the Champion Hurdle race for next week. And there is a lot of anger around it because they appreciate how good the horse is, but they want to see it now test itself up against another horse. There's another great horse called State Man in Ireland. He's a fantastic horse. They want to see the two of them come up against each other, and they're not. And I think in boxing, all too often we see what are purported to be great fighters. Test yourself against another top fighter, not against the bums. People are tired of that. They see it year in, year out, and there are other sports where they can see that level of competition that are putting boxing to shame.
Well, this is where tennis got it right for me. What was the competition that was in the O2 for a few years?
World Tour Finals.
World Tour Finals, where they just had the best 16?
Yeah. No, it was about 10.
Was it less? 10.
I think.
The best 10 players in the world, just get it on.
Absolutely.
Cool. I'm seeing Andy Murray, Novak Djokovic, Rafa Nadal, Roger Federer, and then there was who's Japanese guy? I saw him a couple of times. He was really good. Anyway, and even without the top 4, the ones below that were still all really, really good.
Snooker has it in the Masters every January. The top
just put
16,
the best on show.
Put the best on show. That's what punters want to see. And we live in a sporting climate and also a consumer climate where if a sport isn't delivering that, people can go elsewhere and go to another sport and get that. And that's what boxing is in a weird place, really, because as I said, they have their own dedicated channels. So maybe that kind of, I don't want to say complacency. And there might be people who are of a boxing persuasion watching and say, you guys don't know what you're talking about. But I just think people with a passing interest have got so many sports where the level of competition between the top competitors is there. It's high. Boxing for me, I might be wrong, but boxing for me doesn't have
AJ,
that.
when you win your fight on the weekend, come on the sofa and tell us if we're wrong or right. Come on.
So that wasn't our first topic. That was...
No, right? I just took on the left there. That's half the show done.
None of us knew that was coming.
Sorry.
So it's now become our first topic because the podcast can't go on forever. So what was topic 2 is now consigned to the bin. This is topic 1. It's back into the world of football, thankfully. maybe more of our area of expertise. And we're going to talk about the weekend, the Manchester derby. Embarrassment, men against boys. Manchester United got an early goal through Marcus Rashford, but it finished Manchester City 3, United 1. And I want to talk about the manager, Erik Ten Hag. The question I've written here is he the luckiest manager in football? First season in English football, quite impressive. Man United finished third, ended a 6-year trophy drought, winning the EFL Cup. They were also beaten finalists in last season's FA Cup final. In the Premier League, Ten Hag has had 65 matches, 37 wins, 8 draws, 20 defeats, scoring 95, conceding 82. But I think it's the manner of Manchester United's defeat at the weekend, and maybe the number of defeats that they've had so far this season in the Premier League, which has got me questioning Ten Hag. 11th Premier League defeat. Their record is 12, by the way, in the Premier League. They will definitely surpass that this season. Facts only. What I was kind of incredulous about was the amount of credit that Manchester United got. It stunned me, the number of people who were like, Man United did really well. To use a boxing analogy, stayed in the fight for 10 rounds and then got knocked out, as opposed to getting knocked out in the 3rd round, which apparently was like, wow, you know? And a lot of people, and I think you said this to me, what did you expect? If Brighton went away to Manchester City and played like Manchester United and got beaten the way they got beaten, I'd give them 0 credit. Barely strung a pass together, United. 4 or 5 passes. Yes, they had several half chances. You might even call them good chances. Scored a great goal from Rashford. But they were never really in the game. I went to the match. It was a matter of time. It was a matter of time. Everyone at halftime, City have already won. United walks off at halftime, exhausted, chasing shadows. And people are giving them credit. And I just find it stunning because honestly, I truly believe this. If I supported Wolves and they went to Man City and they played like that, even I'd be disappointed. I'm not even going to lie to you.
Do you think
even I would be, if I supported Wolves?
Do you think they got credit because everyone expected them to be beaten 5 or 6, and they hung on in there? I take your point. I'm just trying to.
But how often do they get beaten 5 or 6 realistically? Like I get it.
They got beat.
No, I get it. They've conceded a lot of goals to their big rivals. I get that. But those games are not going to happen every single time they play one another that you're going to concede 5 or 6. Let's be honest. Man United had the easiest game plan in the world away at City. People were like, they had a structure. They were compact. Well, obviously, if your whole team's 30 yards away from your goal, you're going to be compact. If you can't get out your own half, you're going to be compact. How is Erik Ten Hag getting any credit from how Manchester United played at the weekend?
So I'm one of those people that you're referring to who you've described, and I'll stand on it. So I wouldn't say I praised Manchester United. I just didn't understand why a lot of my Man United supporting friends, well, actually I do, because it's your club, you're emotional about it and you want to do better. So I do get it to some degree. Yeah. But my perspective was, at the bare minimum, in this particular big game for Manchester United, I saw them with a plan. I saw them try. I saw them with a structure. And look, it's a low bar. It is a low bar. But hang on a minute. The point I'm making is, in the last 3 or 4 years, against United, against Liverpool in particular, City and Liverpool in particular, I've not even seen that. I've seen no plan. I've seen you get popped from minute 1. I've seen the game over after 20 minutes. I've seen no commitment. I've seen no even semblance of, let's try and stay in this game. So whilst I understand and accept that it's a very low bar that I'm going from, that's where Manchester United are. That's where you are. So going to City and not getting battered 5-0, forget the heritage, the history of your name, and forget you said if it was Wolves or Brighton, you're not that far off those teams. Forget the names. You're not that far off those teams.
No, those
so
teams
for
are
me,
better, but
okay. There you go.
On their day, they're possibly
better. There's not a big gap. So I'm just saying, if it was one of those mid-table teams that did that, I'd be like, all right, they lost 3-1. The better team won, but it wasn't an embarrassment.
Now listen, you're giving them credit for having a plan.
Yes,
but come on, the plan was to lose basically. The plan was to wait to be punched in the face, essentially. We didn't put our hands up. The plan was we were just waiting. If Brighton go to Man City, they might lose 3-1 as well. But they're going to try and play football. The manager's been there for 18 months, going on 2 years. So why do Man United not have a plan that includes us playing for 10 or 15 or so minutes?
I disagree.
Like playing.
So in that first half, we've discussed this as well. In that first half, I don't think it was a case of let's sit in for 45 minutes and just not get knocked out. There seemed to be a plan whereby you were solid, and then we can hit you on the counter with Garnacho and Rashford. And on at least 2 occasions in that first half, you did. Now, second half, it faded and you got worn down, the better team won, and it was what it was. But in that first half, I just don't think it's fair to say that United just took it. I think they were solid. There was a plan to win. The Chelsea game against City wasn't that much different to the United plan I saw. The difference is, Haaland had a man in front of goal.
Mid-table teams.
Well, this is the point. This is what you've got to do. It's what mid-table teams have to do. Be solid, be hardworking, and take a chance when you get it. And you did.
The game plan was what Rob Edwards would probably have done. The game plan was what Chris Wilder would have done. Yeah. Like, how can you give Erik Ten Hag the credit? So you have to put it into context. Yeah, teams that go to City with that game plan and performed how Man United performed would deserve credit if we would expect them to have nothing more to offer.
But I don't think you do.
No, but listen, I'm saying that after 18 months at the football club, I'll ask you the question. Why don't Man United have more to offer?
That's a different question.
No.
That's a different question.
But because they don't have more to offer, they don't deserve credit.
No.
It's like we're congratulating them for getting dressed in the morning.
No.
What they did at the weekend was a bare minimum.
But my
minimum they ran. But
my question to you,
the minimum.
My question to you and to Darren would be: bearing in mind the players you've got, I don't rate many of those Man United players. What did you expect? You can't expect them to play football.
No, listen.
You can't expect them to. What's the alternative to what we saw?
Listen. What do I expect after we played Fulham and lost the week before? And what do I expect after the manager being in charge for 18 months?
2 different questions.
2 different answers.
Yes.
Same question.
Okay,
Similar question.
Yeah.
2 different answers.
Yeah.
Because, yes, if you're going on who Man United are right now, I wouldn't have wanted to expect much more. And this is why I think Ten Hag is lucky. Because we're basing him, how Man United should perform this week, on how they performed last week. He's the only manager who has to be a marginal improvement on last week. Bro, if you've been at the club for this level of time, why is your team not miles ahead of where it is right now?
But again, you're asking 2 different questions. Should Man United have a better team after 18 months? Yes.
Yeah, but you were the one
Should they have
asking me
done
what I
better
expect?
on the weekend than they did?
But you're asking me what I expect. So what I expect...
From the City game or from the season?
No, what I expect Manchester United to be right now, which is how they played in their last game, I expect them to be miles better. And that is why they don't deserve any credit for being as bad as they are. Why should I give them credit for being terrible? I don't understand why they're getting credit for being shit. Why am I giving them any credit?
Because again, I think
because they could have lost 5, 6, 7, 8 nil.
We're still conflating 2 points.
It could have been 7 nil.
Conflating should they have performed better on the weekend with should they be in a better state generally after 18 months?
Because we couldn't keep the ball at the weekend because we're not better than we are after 18 months.
You couldn't keep the ball on the weekend because the players you've got on the pitch aren't very good.
No, bro.
Should you have a better player on the pitch after 18 months? Yes, you should.
That's why I brought up Wolves and Brighton. Because you're looking at 2 teams that are very well coached at the moment, Gary O'Neill, Roberto De Zerbi. And a lot of people would look at the 2 squads and say, particularly Wolves, you wouldn't swap it with Man United, particularly with Brighton, they've got a lot of young, inexperienced players. They've got a good coach. They've lost a lot of games, by the way, Brighton. This is why I chose these 2 teams, right? The plan in every game is to play football, particularly for Brighton. Win, lose or draw, we're going out here to try and control the possession, to try and create chances. Doesn't always work, but that's our plan. Now we're saying that Erik Ten Hag deserves credit because his plan is to put 11 players behind the ball and use 2 speedsters and long it into the channels or in behind and see if they can get onto the end of the ball on a 30%, 50% chance ball. It's only going to happen a handful of times in the game. If we score on those chances, we might win if we can keep a clean sheet. Bro, listen to me. The manager has been there for 18 months. We're talking about quality of player. I don't know why. There's enough quality to keep the ball for more than 3 or 4 passes in the Man United team. I'm not saying they should have won the game. I'm not saying they should have won the game. I'm saying the scoreline could have been the same. And if we played like Brighton, I would have given them credit. See what I mean? I'm not saying we should have won.
If you're Jim Ratcliffe, what are you going to do at the end of the season?
He's gone. He's lucky he's still there now.
Who do you replace him with?
De Zerbi. Why not?
No, well, tell me why you would replace him with De Zerbi.
There's a project. I don't think Man United are going to attract one of the world's elite managers. I think when you're looking at what the best teams in football do right now, it is an aggressive style of football. It's a possession game. And it's about chance making. Liverpool, incredible. All over you, smother you. 5-6 players in the team that can score goals regularly. Manchester City, elite. You're not going to get to that level anytime soon. But what's conducive to winning the Premier League? What's conducive to winning the Champions League right now? Man United need a manager who is at the lower end of their journey, who's not going to come into the club and be like, I need a £70 million player, I need a £90 million player. You need to go and get me someone who can... Because elite managers, hold on, let me finish. You asked me why him, are going to ask for those things. What we need is someone who... I know that people are talking about Graham Potter, and I see him as someone who you almost put into a system, as in top to bottom at the club. They're talking about Graham Potter because apparently that's who Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford want, right? But I see him more as someone who's like put within the structure at the football club, and basically we buy the players for you and you coach. We don't want you to tell us how to run the football club. We don't want that big influence. We just want you to give the players a structure, and we're going to buy players to work to a certain structure. If you're not the manager, we're going to get someone else, and it's just going to be like that. I think that's how they want to run the football club. But I do feel like if you want to compete with the best managers in the world, the character and personality of the manager has become a big thing.
I look at the
and I'm just looking around. The passion and the character of Klopp, of Guardiola, even of Arteta. People complain about what he's like on the touchline, but he's a very passionate guy. You can see it. It's helping their teams. So I don't want a reserve manager, which is what we have at the moment. I don't think that helps our team, to have someone who sits there silently on the touchline. And De Zerbi is an extreme character, but for me, he's not a yes man, and that's what they need for me. And I think it needs to be someone with the potential to be an elite manager who isn't yet there, because this is going to take 3 to 5 years.
2 more questions. Do you think De Zerbi's reputation is helped by the fact that he can afford to lose 4-0 with Brighton to Luton and nobody bat an eyelid? Because he's lost with Brighton to a number of lesser sides, or sides you would expect them to be beating, but they play good stuff, and so everyone thinks that he's doing a wonderful job. Do you think he could go to Manchester United and have a sequence of results like that and still retain that status? And the other question I got for you is this. All the managers that the clubs you mentioned, Klopp, Guardiola and Arteta, well, Arteta came from Manchester City, a winning machine at City.
Novice manager.
And was a novice, but he had come from working at Manchester City with a plan. And at the time, City were going great guns. Klopp had come from Dortmund, where they'd won the Bundesliga before and challenged the domination of Bayern Munich. And obviously Guardiola had been winning Champions League with Barcelona and come across. You're really saying that De Zerbi kind of compares to those guys?
I'm not saying it even has to be him, but he's a perfect example of the kind of manager that I want at Man United. Listen, if Michael Carrick comes, I'd be delighted. If Kieran McKenna comes to Man United, I'd be delighted.
As manager?
Because these coaches don't get the respect that they deserve. A lot of the coaches now are putting out fantastic game plans. Quality of player for a lot of the styles of play makes a big, big difference.
I hear you, but Xabi Alonso's being linked with Liverpool and he's dominating the German league at the moment. I think it's too soon for him. And the guys that you've mentioned a second ago, their records aren't as consistent.
So let me ask you, who do you think is that, if not give us a name, who do you think is the type of manager that Man United
should be aspiring to a big A-list name, because you're Manchester United.
What, as
I asked you the same question. Who would you?
Zidane, yeah, somebody like that. Listen, you could have a Zidane who's going to go to Manchester United and say, as a starting point, I want to change the culture at this club. There are a number of players that I want to move out of the club, and if the club are prepared to take the hit in losing those players, I want to rebuild it around a core of young players whose attitudes are first class, and the squad players who are prepared to work hard.
I think to Darren's point there, I think if you want what you want, I know you want to just gut the team, and this summer just take the losses, just 8, 9, 10 players have got to go. I'd argue Zidane or someone of that standing has got a better chance of making that happen than a De Zerbi.
Absolutely.
Zidane comes in and says, all right, I'm Zinedine Zidane. I'm a 4-time Champions League, 3-time Champions League winner. We know the CV. I'll come. Contracts will sign. Money's fine. But I need those 9 players gone this summer. Not what we're going to try and move them on this summer. Does De Zerbi have that same weight? All right, you want me, Man United? Cool. I want those 9. I'm not sure if you can have that.
It's not even that. Sorry, before you answer, if you look at De Zerbi, he is somebody who is, his sides play good football, but if he goes to United, he will need time. And in that time that he needs, City are going to get stronger, Liverpool are going to get stronger, Arsenal are going to get stronger. You need somebody who doesn't need as much time to learn on the job with the pressures, the related pressures that come with a big club. As somebody like a Zidane of that stature who can cope with the pressure, who will have the press eaten out of their hand, who will have the respect of the players instantly because of who they are, because of what they've achieved, and because of the way that they like to play their football.
Firstly, the group of players at Man United couldn't be coached by Jose Mourinho. So respect and all that stuff, I don't think these group of players have the character to work with an elite coach. But Zidane doesn't even want to be a manager. I don't want him to come to Man United.
But Hugh, you said...
Because he doesn't even look like he cares about coaching. You want to give him the most difficult job in the world right now to turn basically Man United back into a giant.
Not the most difficult job in the world.
No,
Real
Madrid
is. Real Madrid
because how many years do you think it will take?
Job.
No,
in terms of the pressure... No. I've heard... Listen, I've covered football for 25 years. And I've heard a number... I've covered football for a number of years and I've seen a number of jobs being described as impossible jobs. We've got a really good example this season with Spurs, which looked like an absolute basket case at the start of the season.
Different level.
And it is a different level, I accept, but the concept of the impossible club still holds true. If you have somebody who goes in, he's failing.
Well, he is by their standards.
He's competing for the Champions League.
Yeah, but he's 5 points off it.
But he's competing. Nobody expected him to be anywhere near it.
If he doesn't make the top 4, is he a success?
Yes, because without Harry Kane, nobody expected
them to be fifth.
Right now, they've scored for 35 consecutive games.
It's about points.
Listen to what I'm saying. Lots of people. Sorry.
Dan, our producer's just
on the ropes. Come on, Darren. Done the boxing chat. You got to swing back. Got you on the ropes.
Exactly.
I believe in you.
Exactly. At the moment, they are on a run of scoring in 35 consecutive games. Everybody felt without Harry Kane they would fall to pieces. They shouldn't even be in the conversation for Europe. They are. They shouldn't even be in the conversation for the Champions League. Well, they're fifth, which means they're in the conversation for Europe. That squad is good enough to be in Europe.
Of course it is.
It's his first season and he's rebuilt it. I'm talking about the Champions League.
Sorry.
But the point is that there was a widely discussed narrative, and let's not reinvent history, that they would fall apart without Harry Kane, and they are doing just fine without him. And I think as far as Man United are concerned, there are a number of players there that I would lose, but there are a number of players there that I would keep. And if you've got a high caliber manager who goes in, who knows how to respond to the demands of achieving success quickly with a big club, you have a chance. De Zerbi is promising, but I don't think you can talk about De Zerbi the caliber of the other clubs.
He's not even my number one candidate.
De Zerbi could go into potentially a club that's doing well and continue because all the structures are in place. But if you're talking about a club where you're putting the structures in place, you need an accelerant. You need somebody who's going to act as a catalyst.
But he is the accelerant because of a clear, defined style of football that's trying to push the boundaries.
Style of football.
Man United don't need a manager for the last 5 years.
Style
they need
of football is one
for the
thing.
next 10 years.
Style of football is one thing. Winning is quite another.
I think just bringing it back to the original question, because it was about Ten Hag being, is he the luckiest manager? I think there's definitely an element of fortune in terms of 18 months. All right, one trophy in the bag, another cup final. They lost to City. But I think this year has almost negated all the good work from last year.
Yeah.
finishing third last year. Was it third or fourth? Third last year, and a trophy that has been cancelled out by, is it 11 defeats in the league? Come on,
13 before Christmas. It's the first Man United major I can remember. Who I think it's the first one since 1930 to have 13 defeats.
We're in Ole Gunnar Solskjaer kind of territory. I mean, this might be worse, and that was beyond bad. So I think he's lucky in that sense. I don't personally think that he will be there next season. I think the bar will be now. If you get us top 4, you're probably good. But even if we get some top 4, I still don't think that might be enough.
I think he'll leave if they go. Even if they're top 4.
So I think he's fortunate, but I will end by saying, I don't think he's a bad manager. I like him. I think he's a good manager that's done some bad work in the last year. But I think he's a good manager.
I don't think his character helps him. I'm not going to lie. I don't think the fact that he's so reserved.
I agree.
Some of the comments sound delusional on top of it as well.
That's been kind.
And I don't think that helps him. No, I'm like, no. He never wants to put a flamethrower on the players, and I get it because, firstly, a lot of that change room must know that they're going to get moved on sooner rather than later.
Do you think he knows? Sorry to cut you there. Do you think he knows I'm not here next year? Do you think he?
There is a part of me that thinks he does. Yeah. There is a part of me that thinks he does. But his job is to get Man United into the top 4, and I think he's looking at it very professionally, and he's trying to play the style of football that he thinks will stop us from losing games. But I'll be honest, I can't believe where Man United are in the table. The number of games that they've won where they shouldn't have got anything from the game is remarkable, actually. Yeah. But I think for people to turn around and be like, it's because all the players are terrible.
All the players aren't terrible.
Nah. The plan that we had against Man City, this is why I think he's lucky. Because I think about the teams with, I'm not going to say even lesser players because they perform probably at a higher, currently have a better form than a lot of the Man United players. But the idea that there's no quality there, like Garnacho, Rashford, Fernandes, McTominay, Casemiro, Kobbie Mainoo. Johnny Evans started centre-back with Varane, but Dalot and then Lindelof playing left-back's not ideal with Onana. But the idea that you can't pass the ball around for even 10 minutes of that game and have a little bit of concerted pressure, actually, is a madness. Because even in the FA Cup final last year, Man United were miles better. I know it's at Wembley, you're not away from home at the Etihad, but we had 15, 20 or so minutes where we won the penalty where Man United were on top of the game.
Yeah.
Never for 1 minute of that game. Not only were Man United not on top, they didn't look like they were going to even attempt to pull 3 or 4, 5 passes together. They weren't organised. People were like, we defended so well. Kobbie Mainoo didn't know whether he was coming or going. Casemiro was getting walked past in the middle of the pitch. You know, these guys are supposedly good players. I didn't see any real effect on the game from Bruno Fernandes. All right, he had the assist, but you know, this is a player who we all think with the football is an intelligent player. It just didn't happen, and I just think it's silly for people to keep saying Man United don't have the players. They don't have the players to beat City. I don't think they have the players to beat City. Do they have the players to show us more than they showed us at the weekend?
Maybe.
Absolutely, bro. Not maybe.
Maybe.
Absolutely, man. Come on.
I think you maybe slightly overestimating some of those players. I don't think they're as bad as they're showing, but...
Nah, man. Listen, West Ham's fans would win all over Moyes if they put that performance in. I'm not even joking with you. West Ham fans would have been all over David Moyes if they went to the Etihad, had scored a worldie, but barely had a shot. Well, we had one other shot in the rest of the game. We had 2 shots.
Maybe. I just don't think...
And the thing is, I went to the game at the Emirates where West Ham beat you at Christmas, and it was a similar game plan. But when they had the ball, they kept it miles better. And when they had those breaks and those chances... No, but they held the ball up the pitch, so they had to bring Arsenal back to defend. And what that means is when they had to attack, they had to come from their own penalty box. We never even kept them in their half. It's crazy that anyone would... Anyway, we're going to go on too long. I won. I'm calling it, bro. Right, into the second half of the podcast where things get a little bit more serious, although I was deadly serious about Manchester United. We kind of talk about what's going on in society, whatever it might be. Might even be relationships, might be what's on TV, but for the second week in a row, it is quite political, I have to say, and it's for good reason. The question is really, should we worry about our right to protest, or do protests need more enforcement? This comes from Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, saying, don't let the extremists hijack your marches. Of course, those people that have been taking to the streets calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. He kind of went outside of number 10, got the old, what's it called? Lectern out on Friday afternoon when everyone was on their way to the pub. He does these little announcements, it's by the by. And I think he thinks that people care what he thinks.
Or he thinks that he's a good enough orator that he can engage people.
But I think he thinks his words have gravitas.
You're not a good speaker, bro.
No, but I think he thinks his words have gravitas because he's the Prime Minister. Rishi, no one cares what you think, bro.
Especially on a Friday evening.
No one cares what you think. But anyway, nonetheless, he is still the Prime Minister. What I disliked about it was he made out that he was kind of addressing people generally, or addressing people who are peaceful on marches, and yet at the same time he seemed to address those people while almost telling them not to do the things that the non-peaceful protesters were doing. Here's an example. You've got a chance in the coming weeks to show that you can protest decently, peacefully, and with empathy for your fellow citizens. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited. Despite the fact, listen, we can talk about the Tory party and being united, etc., etc. But he added, yes, you can march and protest with passion, and you can demand the protection of civilian life, but no, you cannot call for violent jihad. So that's what I mean. He switched from talking to peaceful protesters when he was talking. I mean, he said you, so I imagine he's addressing a specific group. Maybe he's addressing all of us. But then he moved it on to the violent stuff and the jihad stuff, which for me it was like, well, who are you talking to here? All of these points are by the by. He's also been talking about recently that there's a growing consensus that mob rule is replacing democratic rule. He's asked for more robust responses from the police to protect politicians, to protect democratic processes. He's been saying it's kind of undemocratic because of the pressure exerted on MPs by people calling them out over this entire issue. We're not going to get into the issue, but I think it is important that we discuss our rights and freedoms, particularly when it comes to the right to protest. So that was it. Really, the question is a longer one than I'd like, but should we worry about the right to protest, or actually do these protests need stronger enforcement? What do you think?
Well, what he did a lot of with that speech the other day is what the Tories have been doing a lot of, the ministers, the government, have been doing a lot of over some time now, some weeks, which is conflating legitimate protest, which has existed for months, years, hundreds of years, with extremism. Mm-hmm. And I think if you looked at many of the protests, A, they've had fewer arrests than you would have at Glastonbury, for example, and B, the composition of the people marching are white, middle-aged women, men, black, and children, black, middle-aged women, men, children, Asian men, women, children, and all of them want peace, basically. They just they are as appalled by what happened on October 7 as they have been since then, with all of the killing they've seen on their screens, in their newspapers, heard about on the radio. They just want it to stop. And the idea that they're being characterized as a mob, as a threat to democracy, is the government trying to use a certain type of characterization to impose those restrictions you've been talking about, to silence legal protest. We saw in Rochdale at the back end of last week that 12,300 people used the democratic process to vote for somebody that the government didn't like. And so the government started to conflate the election of George Galloway with extremism.
I just to stop you there, just so people know, if you didn't see Sunak's speech outside Number 10, he actually called George Galloway's election in Rochdale horrific for democracy, which I actually found slightly perverse, because obviously we know that the MPs and particularly the Prime Minister going back and forth with other parties do openly criticise them, and I guess there is an implicit implication of that people shouldn't have voted for you, they should vote for the Conservative Party. But I still think,
and also he wasn't elected.
Well, he was elected as an MP.
I mean,
but as the Prime Minister, yeah. But I still think that I found it very strange and very disturbing that a Prime Minister would so overtly, even if he disagrees with the election, it was a fair and democratic process in a democratic country where people used their vote to put the MP that they wanted into Parliament to represent them, to call it horrific and do it outside Number 10 with the platform that he has, wasn't right in my eyes.
It is symptomatic of the way that the Prime Minister and the politicians around him use language and speak almost with forked tongue, really. And we've seen that so many times over the past 18 months, whether it's Suella Braverman, whether it's Priti Patel even before her, whether it's Robert Jenrick, whether it's all of the people who are talking about using the politics of division, who are trying to demonize ordinary people, ordinary tax-paying people, many of whom have been in this country for many, many years, but characterizing people as a threat. And then you've got, and obviously you've got a Prime Minister who's not doing anything about the kind of language they're using, Lee Anderson is using, and yet he is trying to characterize ordinary middle class, like I say, and the colour is important. White, middle-aged women, young men, children, ordinary people marching because they're distressed by what they see on their TV screens, and they want peace. They want the killing to stop. And him and others characterising that as calling for some sort of jihad or some. They've been described routinely by Suella Braverman as hate marches, and the government use language that they think will embed itself in the discourse of ordinary people every day. So it's very much Donald Trump kind of stuff, where you just reinforce and reinforce and reinforce. This is what they're called, so that people think that they can describe it as such, as a matter of course. But again, the amount of arrests at these marches are very low. Yes, you will have extremists at every march. I challenge you to name me a march we've ever had in this country where there haven't been people who attach themselves on the fringes, but the majority of the people who go there wanting to see peace.
And this is why I think your point, and the word used there was conflation, is important, because what that speech from Sunak did was conflate the issue of people's fair and legal right to protest with the idea that somehow these protests are a hotbed of tension and fighting and things across the line of what is legal, which just isn't true. And it reminded me of, I went on a handful of Black Lives Matters protests during that summer, 2021. And I saw one scuffle when we got to Battersea, where the American embassies, I believe, that got a bit out of hand. But apart from that, nothing. But the reporting you'd have seen from the government when they were on news programs would have been like, this was just a hate march, and it was like, this is just not true. But I think we know why they do that.
Tell us.
Tell
us.
I think they do it because they're struggling to really get across their politics without ratcheting up the level of tension and discourse that's required to mobilise their base.
It's worse for me. It's actually worse for me. I don't like to use the F word too much, so I won't. But all I'll say is there has been a groundwork laid for a long, long time, and the right to protest was already being infringed upon and spoken about by Priti Patel when she was Home Secretary, by Suella Braverman afterwards. And the reason is, there's going to be a reason for us to protest against them. And what they're using is every opportunity to curtail our rights in that regard, so that we don't use that power against them. So they want to describe them as hate marches, because what they're trying to build in the public consciousness is, when we take away your right to do this, there'll be a valid reason. And them, the Conservative Party, is not a valid enough reason. But there's hate marches going on. We're going to have to pull your rights to do that a little bit back. Oh, this is undemocratic. They're threatening democracy now. We've got to pull it back a little bit more. MPs are unsafe. We've got to pull it back a little bit more. But only because they feel like, sorry to interrupt, only because they feel like we're going to come for them. Because if you look at the Owen Paterson affair, over his lobbying, egregious it was described as, I think, breaking of the lobbying rules, what they tried to do then is, instead of just having his little 1 month ban, what did they do? Or was it even 10 days? He wasn't going to be gone for long. They tried to rewrite the rules on that. The illegal proroguing of Parliament. You know, when we talk about even the Brexit deal, we don't need to read it. We don't need to scrutinise it. We've been talking about this for years. Just push it through. This is the party, unfortunately, the Conservative Party is the party where they want to do things. They've moved so far to the right as a party that they want to do things that they know that most people won't green light. Most people at home won't agree with. But if they can put us in a situation or a mindset where it's almost like,
you have to accept it.
Bro, I'm not even going to name names. Like I said, I don't even want to talk about the F word, but the amount of leaders all over the world who've assumed power based on emergency powers is big. Based on, I had to take away the rights of Parliament because we're in a state of emergency, has happened dozens of times all over the world. And so my big fear is that they put us into a state where if one thing kicks off, I don't know, might be Yemen, might be having to get involved in, suddenly it's, you know what, guys, Parliament's going to have to close. We're going to have to move the election to another year, or we're going to have to send these guys to fight in a war, and we all know that changes how people vote as well. If you feel like, in a democratic society, if you feel like you're at war, that really changes how people feel about the election, because they don't like change in that period. They believe that they've got a strong leader who's going to help us through the situation, so why change? The next person might be worse.
I think it is important to point out that nobody wants to see MPs' families under threat. Nobody wants to see that MPs under any kind of physical threat. These are people, they get elected, they want to do the job, and however much you disagree with what they have to say,
I don't include those when we talk about the rights to protest. I don't include that. No, because people don't have a right to do that.
Absolutely, and we're all agreed on that, and I think everyone watching and listening is agreed on that. But I go back to what I started out saying. As a kid, I watched protesters outside Greenham Common and campaigning for nuclear disarmament. Poll tax marches I've seen over the years, anti-war protests, miners' strikes and marches in support of. There have been all sorts of protests affecting ordinary people here. And I think when you try to characterise marches in a certain way that are trying to appeal for peace and trying to get the government to use their voices to call for peace, if you can characterise that as hate marches, then the kind of march that we could see where people are campaigning for domestic issues to be addressed, suddenly they'll be characterised in a different way, and then people will understand what the people marching currently
But this
are
is what
trying
I
to say.
I feel like they feel like these rights are going to be used for other issues and the finger's pointed directly at them. So what they want to do is, they can see it coming down the line. We'll use every opportunity we can to take these rights away from people. They're even talking about just the finances around it. It costs £25 million a week to police these protests. So, we've got people like Farage saying, you've made your point. It's like, well, they haven't, have they? Because they called it for a ceasefire and we haven't got one. They obviously haven't.
I think just my final point would be that the left, those that are on the left, feel that the protest is their only way now of getting their message to the government. Whereas I think the government, and we have lots of media outlets that are right-leaning, if not on the right, are using those media outlets to shut down the protests on the left. That's their way of, I see, combating what the left is doing, which is saying, look, we're not happy with X, we're going to protest. And in the main, those are normally legal, law-abiding, they're fine. The government is leaning on large parts of the media to try and shut that down and get their message through. That actually, as you just said, no more.
I think the key thing is for people to be alert and alive to the conflation of language and the way that the government is twisting and subverting language to be able to make people feel under threat. And the people who are organising these marches are all doing it the right way. They are using their democratic rights to protest. They're working in conjunction with the police. They're making sure as much as they can that they can instruct people to remain orderly, to make sure that the people around them feel safe, and they're going to enormous lengths to work within the parameters of the law. And that's quite important to point out, because there are lots of people who would have you believe that it's anarchy on our streets, and I don't believe that to be the case. And certainly people I know who have been on these marches don't either believe that to be the case or want that to be the case.
All right, we'll end it there. Appreciate it. Intelligent conversation with my friends.
We try.
That's what it's all about.
So we got up our levels.
Yeah. Well, due to you throwing in a topic that wasn't meant to be in the podcast, due to me getting so angry about Manchester United, our usual feature, and it will be usual, Talk Me a Talk, was meant to be with Darren Lewis today, but we are so tight for time.
We haven't got a minute?
Well, the thing is, I wanted to ask you just something that is maybe going to take a minute or longer to end on, but it takes us back to football. But we've got just such a big game this weekend that I feel like I can't avoid it.
Can I just ask you something that non-football, non-politics related then?
You heard Hugh say we've got short on time.
Okay, listen, we'll edit that bit out then, shall we? Talk me a talk.
I tell you what it is. I saw a Celebrity Big Brother coming on TV, right? And I was just thinking, has that Big Brother concept?
Is this your Talk Me a Talk?
Yeah,
is this what you're going to say? Okay. Okay. Talk Me a Talk with Darren. Darren Lewis. Go on then.
Only because in the hours before this podcast, before I did the school run with my kids actually asked me, and my oldest is 17 and my youngest is 13, and they would ask me, what's Big Brother? They actually asked, and I felt very old, exactly. Mm-hmm. And so I was explaining the Big Brother concept to them, and they were fascinated. The whole eviction the whole eviction concept, and all of it. And it just did set me thinking. I know there is a version at the moment that they pointed me to on YouTube called Locked Up. But it's exactly, you're shaking your head, you've never seen it. Exactly.
YouTube now.
And it just makes me think.
Streaming live. Locked Up.
Streaming live. It just made me think, has that Big Brother concept run its course? Do we think it's quite edgy and happening when actually it's quite dated?
Everything's cyclical, everything comes back. And like I said, for people, Big Brother for us, we've seen 20 iterations of, is no longer interesting. But for people that have never seen it play out, we've seen nasty Nick, we've seen someone think someone was dead and not be dead. The greatest pieces of TV in British history.
So it's on that point, do we think now that the concept and the idea of Big Brother now, people are much more open to doing a madness now than they were 20 years ago? Because I see these, especially on YouTube, you can kind of do anything. But you've just named a couple of instances where actually at the time, we thought those things were like, this is
crazy.
Like crazy TV. Like, you think it's easier now to be...
I think younger people, and this is not to me to be acting really old, but...
they don't care.
No, it's not even that, right? Because the thing is, I was thinking about, there must have been a version of Big Brother before Big Brother, and maybe there wasn't, particularly when you're watching cameras 24 hours. But... like, Pop Idol was a big thing for our generation, and TV talent shows in the 70s and the 60s where people would get up and... they weren't popular in the 90s, but they came back. Do you know what I mean? So I'm sure this show is just coming back, and it will come back again in 30 years' time after this little run. But in terms of doing a madness, the only thing I'd say about younger people is that they've been brought up in a generation where you apply for these TV shows to try and make yourself famous. Mm-hmm. Whereas I don't necessarily think for us it was you go on Big Brother and you're going to have like a career afterwards. And you're going to be presenting this and doing that.
I don't know. There were lots of people
I don't think people really thought that, because believe me, These people thought they were going to go back to their IT job the way that they
These
were.
guys that have got careers now off the back of
Absolutely,
the first
yeah.
episodes
I
of
think
Big
by
Brother.
season 4
That
or
Craig
5
guy,
of Big Brother,
he's still
people
on this
realise.
morning, I think, doing little
DIY.
handy DIY.
Yeah, but that's what he did.
Yeah.
No, that's
what he did, yeah, so-
Ryan and them, but maybe he was a bit later. But my point is that there were people that.
But there were ones that disappeared and just went back to their normal life.
But I think the point
Having
is,
been,
none of them
But the
thought
great-
going in,
yeah.
I'm going to have a career on the other side of it.
No, I don't
Whereas
think
now
did.
they are.
Yeah. And that I think changes the tone of the show.
Of course, because
I think you watch Love Island and you think
it's not authentic.
I watch Love Island sometimes.
You watch Love Island?
I've never seen.
But you think they're just doing something to project themselves
Yeah.
up the hierarchy in terms of, and we even watched I'm a Celeb, and even though they're obviously celebs, certain ones in there you were thinking,
You're trying to ting it. You're trying to ting
See,
it.
I have to say to both of you-
so they know, they know.
I actually think, and I know we've got to wrap up here, but I actually think...
did 5 minutes ago, by the way.
I think you're all missing a trick. The best reality TV shows now aren't throw people together and see what they do. They're more formulaic. Love is Blind is outstanding on Netflix. I would recommend that.
I watched the first season.
That honestly, I really...
First season was very good, but I felt like
Exactly.
I'd seen that there was no more layers to this.
But you watched it all.
The first season was brilliant. Yeah,
There you go.
Yeah,
See?
but they're on
So
like
you
season
agree with
5
me?
now, aren't they? They're multiple seasons in now, and I'm like,
But I heard season 1 was mad.
it was mad.
It's mad.
I've never
It's
seen
mad.
it.
You've got to watch
I've never
it.
seen
And
it.
also the oh my goodness me, I can't remember what it's called now. The
Netflix?
It's about couples who are together for a long time, and they get to a point where either they're going to stay together or they're going to break up. And to test this, they have relationships with other people,
Yeah.
and then
I can't
after
remember
a
what it's called.
fortnight they get back together again. I'm sure somebody listening will remind me what it's called.
God, sorry.
But the point is that I think the best reality TV shows now are ones that have some kind of resolution to it, as opposed to just having... Big Brother started in the year 2000 as just throwing people together and seeing what they did together. And I don't think that works anymore, which is why I don't watch I'm a Celebrity and I don't watch Big Brother, really. And I loved it at the start,
The
but
best
it
show
doesn't
that
mean
I think
anything.
I don't watch a lot of TV, but the best reality TV show that I saw last year, which I just thought was genius, and I think to your point, they think more now about what they want people to rather than just throwing them in a room. It's Traitors. You've seen Traitors?
Never.
Traitors is absolutely insane. It's
Good?
it's so good, really good. I've just started watching something called Trust. I'm on Netflix. It's much more American and frivolous, but I think to your point, people are being much more not calculated, but much more intelligent about what they
Discerning.
want. Yeah,
Yeah.
To try and make good TV.
Yeah, I like, for example, my kids love the Norris Nuts and all of that kind of family stuff. But other people like Say Yes to the Dress, where the whole objective is to try lots of wedding dresses and
That's
see
good.
which one you like.
You might need
watched
that
it?
soon.
All right,
How did we end up here?
Listen, we got to go, and we're not going to talk about Liverpool City because Darren ate the time up.
I think it'll be a draw, by the way.
Draw?
I think it'll be a draw.
Liverpool will win. Liverpool will win. Home record's fantastic. City
City.
only one win at Anfield.
City. I think City.
Okay.
I think City. So split.
is
So it'll be an interesting chat next week. There you go. See what I mean? We just throw everything into the melting pot. It's unplanned. It's unscripted.
It's what we do. It's the what's
It's
up.
real. It's original. So thank you for listening. That was episode 2. Yeah, like I said earlier, make sure you like, subscribe, tell your friends about the podcast.
Leave a comment as well. Comments matter, even if it's just an emoji. Leave a
Just
comment.
tell me what that reality TV show was called, please.
If you had to
All that,
spend,
yeah.
if you had to spend one person that you most want to, one person that you least want to spend some time in Big Brother house with, who would it be?
Oh wow, Craig David.
Most
Least.
and most.
Nia Long.
Neil Long, yeah. All right, mate.
I-
It's not fancy. It's real life. Jesus.
Most, I would say, anybody who can make me laugh. Any comedian who can make me laugh. And least...
Darren.
Come on,
That's
just
like-
say a comedian.
like-
Just say one comedian that can make
What kind of wide
Okay.
net is that?
Okay,
Any funny
Kevin
choices?
Hart. And least Erik Ten Hag, because he would just talk football, but there's nothing else to him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shots fired.
It's interesting. Most, I don't know. Most
Is that
you want
unfair?
to
Is
be
that
someone
unfair?
entertaining and funny, right? Peter Kay or someone like that. For some reason,
That's
I
what I'm
find it
saying.
hilarious.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then least would be like Richard Tice or the Weatherspoons guy, Tim Martin. Is that his name?
Yeah.
Least. Idiot. Anyway, thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.